The night was quiet, almost eerily so in downtown Chicago. Marcus Johnson had just left a long day at work behind him, driving through the city streets toward home. He was still getting used to his new role as the director of the FBI, a position that came with immense responsibility and relentless scrutiny. His mind wandered as he navigated the familiar roads, thinking about the challenges ahead and how much needed to change within the system. But then, without warning, his car sputtered and slowed down before coming to a complete stop under a flickering streetlight. Marcus sighed, gripping the steering wheel tightly for a moment before stepping out into the cool evening air. He glanced around, noting the emptiness of the street. It wasn't unusual for this part of town to be quiet after dark, but tonight felt different somehow, unsettling. As he popped open the hood of his sleek black sedan, the sound of footsteps echoed nearby. Turning his head slightly, he saw two figures approaching from the shadows, police officers, their uniforms visible even in the dim light. "Evening," Marcus said politely, keeping his voice calm and measured. "My car broke down. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong." One of the officers, Kevin Doyle, stepped forward aggressively. His partner, Richard Blake, hung back, watching silently. Kevin's eyes narrowed as they swept over Marcus, taking in his tailored suit, expensive watch, and the high-end vehicle behind him. Something about Marcus set Kevin on edge, not because of anything Marcus did, but simply because of who he was. "What are you doing here?" Kevin demanded, his tone sharp and accusatory. There was no warmth in his voice, only suspicion. "I told you," Marcus replied evenly, refusing to let the officer's rudeness rattle him. "My car broke down, I'm just checking it." Kevin didn't seem satisfied. "Do you live around here?" "No," Marcus answered honestly. "I was heading home when my car stopped working." "Well, maybe if people like you stayed in your own neighborhoods, we wouldn't have these kinds of problems," Kevin muttered loud enough for Marcus to hear. Marcus froze, the implication of those words hitting him like a punch to the gut. He took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay composed. Losing his temper wouldn't help the situation. Instead, he reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out his wallet. Flipping it open, he revealed his FBI badge and credentials. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," Marcus said firmly, holding the badge out toward Kevin. "I'm the director of the FBI. You can verify this if you need to." For a split second, Kevin hesitated. Then, sneering, he waved the badge away dismissively. "Yeah, right. Like I'm supposed to believe that? Everyone knows directors don't drive themselves around in fancy cars late at night." Marcus clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. This wasn't the first time someone had doubted his authority because of his race, but it never got easier to swallow. Still, he tried again, speaking slowly and deliberately. "Officer, I assure you this isn't a joke. If you want, call your supervisor or check my ID against official records. This will all be cleared up quickly." But Kevin wasn't listening anymore. His hand moved instinctively to his holster, drawing his weapon with startling speed. Before Marcus could react, the barrel of the gun was pointed directly at his chest. Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms facing outward, showing that he meant, "No harm, stay where you are." Kevin barked, his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger. "Don't make any sudden moves." Richard shifted uncomfortably beside his partner, clearly uneasy about the escalating situation. "Kevin," he murmured cautiously, "maybe we should—" "Shut up, Blake," Kevin snapped, cutting him off mid-sentence. "You see this guy? Acting all innocent, flashing fake badges, we can't trust him." By now, a small crowd had begun to gather. People passing by stopped to watch, some pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. The glow of cell phone screens illuminated the scene, capturing every detail. The glare in Kevin's eyes, the tension in Marcus's posture, the uncertainty etched onto Richard's face. Someone shouted encouragement from the sidelines, urging Kevin to lower his weapon, but he ignored them, focusing solely on Marcus. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as Marcus stood there frozen in place. Every instinct screamed at him to defend himself, to fight back against the injustice unfolding before him. Yet he knew better than to act impulsively. One wrong move, and things could spiral out of control. So he remained still, his heart pounding, in his chest, waiting for the nightmare to end. Finally, another patrol car arrived, its sirens wailing as it screeched to a halt nearby. Officer Linda Carter stepped out, her expression shifting from confusion to shock as she recognized Marcus. She hurried over, placing herself between him and Kevin. "What's going on here?" Linda asked sharply, her gaze darting between the men. When she saw the gun still trained on Marcus, her eyes widened. "Kevin, stand down, that's Director Johnson." Kevin faltered, lowering his weapon slightly but not completely. "Are you sure? How do we know?" "I've seen him on TV, idiot," Linda interrupted, exasperated. "It's definitely him. Now put your damn gun away before you get us all fired." Reluctantly, Kevin holstered his weapon, though his scowl deepened. Linda turned to Marcus, offering an apologetic smile. "Sir, I'm so sorry about this. Are you okay?" Marcus nodded stiffly, lowering his hands. "I'll be fine," he said, quietly, though his voice carried a weight of restrained emotion. "Thank you for stepping in." As the crowd dispersed, murmuring amongst themselves, Marcus climbed back into his car, shaken but determined. Little did he know, this incident would soon ignite a firestorm across the nation, one that would test his resolve, challenge his leadership, and force him to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and justice. The next morning, Marcus woke up to a storm. Not the kind that rumbles outside with thunder and lightning, but the kind that brews online and spills into every corner of public life. As he scrolled through his phone while sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee, he saw the headlines everywhere. FBI director held at gunpoint by police. Racism allegations rock Chicago PD. Marcus Johnson speaks out. Videos of the previous night's incident flooded social media platforms, each clip accompanied by thousands of comments, some supportive, others hateful. Nicole, his wife, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. She had been watching silently as he absorbed the chaos unfolding around him. "You okay?" she asked softly. Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know," he admitted. "This wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," Nicole said firmly. "But it did happen. And now you have a chance to do something about it, to make sure no one else has to go through what you went through last night." Her words struck a chord with Marcus. He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders once again. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was bigger than that. It was about standing up for justice, even when doing so came at a personal cost. By mid-morning, the story had reached national news outlets. Reporters camped outside his home, shouting questions whenever he or Nicole stepped outside. At FBI headquarters, the mood was tense. Colleagues whispered among themselves, unsure whether to offer condolences or avoid eye contact altogether. Marcus walked into the building like he always did, with his head held high. But today felt different. Today, all eyes were on him. The privacy of his office, Marcus prepared for the inevitable press conference scheduled for later that afternoon. He stared out the window at the sprawling city below, thinking about how much work lay ahead. Reforming law enforcement wouldn't be easy, not when people like Kevin Doyle existed, clinging stubbornly to their biases. But Marcus knew change rarely came without resistance. If anything, the incident had only strengthened his resolve. At the press conference, held in a packed auditorium filled with reporters and camera crews, Marcus stood behind a podium emblazoned with the FBI seal. Flashbulbs popped incessantly as he adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of expectant faces. For a moment, he hesitated, gathering his thoughts. Then, speaking clearly and deliberately, he began. "Last night, I experienced firsthand the fear and humiliation that many Americans face daily because of systemic racism within our institutions," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "What happened to me isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a much larger problem. A problem we must address if we hope to build trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "I demand accountability. An independent investigation will be launched to examine the actions of officers Kevin Doyle and Richard Blake, Justice cannot wait. The room erupted into murmurs, as journalists jotted down notes and snapped photos. Some nodded approvingly, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Marcus braced himself for the backlash he knew would follow, and it didn't take long to arrive. Senator Alan Harper, a vocal critic of progressive reforms, wasted no time airing his grievances during a live television interview. Sitting in a studio chair dressed in a tailored suit, Harper leaned forward conspiratorially toward the host. "Let me tell you something," Harper began, his tone dripping with disdain. "Marcus Johnson is using this unfortunate incident to push a political agenda. He wants to divide us further, to paint all police officers as villains. But let's not forget, the real victims here are hardworking men and women who risk their lives every day to keep us safe." Harper's remarks ignited a firestorm of debate across cable news networks and talk radio shows. Conservative pundits echoed his sentiments, accusing Marcus of playing the victim card for sympathy. Meanwhile, progressive voices rallied behind Marcus, praising his courage and calling for immediate reforms. Back at the police precinct, Kevin Doyle simmered with anger. Suspended pending the investigation, he paced the floors of his small apartment, replaying the events of the previous night in his mind. In his version of the story, he was the hero, a misunderstood officer simply doing his job. Everyone else had gotten it wrong. "This is ridiculous," Kevin shouted, slamming his fist against the wall. "They're trying to ruin my career because of some viral video." Richard Blake, on the other hand, found himself wrestling with guilt. Unlike Kevin, Richard couldn't shake the image of Marcus standing calmly under the threat of a gun. What if roles had been reversed? Would he have reacted differently if Marcus had been white? The questions haunted him, gnawing at his conscience. That evening, Richard decided to reach out to Linda Carter, the officer who had intervened during the incident. They met at a quiet diner, sliding into a booth away from prying ears. "I can't stop thinking about it," Richard confessed, stirring sugar into his coffee absent-mindedly, about how wrong it felt. How scared Director Johnson must have been. Linda nodded sympathetically. "It's tough, Richard. But you're not defined by your worst moment. You still have a choice. Own up to what happened or let it eat." "You alive?" Her words lingered in Richard's mind long after they parted ways. That night, lying awake in bed, he made a decision. No matter what happened next, he owed it to himself and to Marcus to do the right thing. Meanwhile, Marcus returned home to find Nicole waiting for him. She could see the toll the day had taken on him, etched into the lines around his eyes, in the slump of his shoulders. "They're coming after you, aren't they?" Nicole asked gently, handing him a glass of water. Marcus chuckled bitterly. "Yeah. Senator Harper thinks I'm trying to destroy the country. Others are saying I should resign, it's overwhelming." Nicole sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. "Listen to me. You've spent your entire career fighting for justice. Don't let them silence you now. Keep going, for everyone who doesn't have a voice." Her words reignited a spark within Marcus. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, surrounded by love and support, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. Outside, the city buzzed with activity, unaware of the storm brewing within its halls of power. The days following the press conference were a whirlwind of activity for Marcus Johnson. Every waking moment seemed consumed by meetings, phone calls, and media appearances. Supporters praised his bravery, while critics attacked his character and questioned his leadership abilities. But beyond the noise, Marcus faced an even greater challenge, one that came from within the very system he had sworn to serve. In a private meeting room deep inside FBI headquarters, Marcus sat across from Evelyn Monroe, the Secretary of Homeland Security. Her presence commanded attention. She was known for her icy demeanor and unyielding pragmatism. Today, however, there was something else in her eyes. Concern, perhaps, or maybe fear. Whatever it was, it made Marcus uneasy. "Marcus," Evelyn began, leaning forward slightly, "you've done an admirable job speaking out about this issue, but you need to understand something. There are larger forces at play here." Marcus raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. The president has been receiving calls, Evelyn explained carefully. From donors, from allies, from people who, let's just say they're not thrilled with your stance. They're worried this could spiral out of control and damage relationships we've worked hard to build. Marcus frowned, his patience wearing thin. Are you telling me I should back down? That I should ignore what happened and pretend everything's fine? No, Evelyn replied quickly, though her tone softened. What I'm saying is that sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Pushing too hard right now might jeopardize your position and everything you've worked for. Her words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had expected resistance, but hearing it directly from someone he respected stung more than he cared to admit. Still, he refused to yield. I didn't take this job to protect my own interests, Marcus said firmly. I took it because I believed I could make a difference. If that means ruffling feathers, then so be it. Evelyn sighed, sitting back in her chair. She had seen this stubborn streak before and knew better than to argue further. Instead, she offered one final piece of advice. Just tread carefully, Marcus. Not everyone shares your vision. As the meeting ended, Marcus left the room feeling conflicted. On one hand, he appreciated Evelyn's honesty. On the other, her warnings underscored the uphill battle he faced. The fight for justice wasn't just against individuals like Kevin Doyle. It was against an entire system designed to resist change. Back at his office, Marcus found himself staring at stacks of documents detailing cases of police misconduct across the country. Each file represented lives shattered by prejudice and abuse of power. It was overwhelming, yet it fueled his determination to push forward. He picked up his phone and dialed Deputy Director Gregory Lane, hoping to discuss strategies for addressing these systemic issues. But Gregory wasn't interested in collaboration. In fact, over the past few days, Marcus had noticed a growing distance between them. Where once they had worked closely together, Gregory now seemed evasive, avoiding eye contact during meetings and deflecting questions about ongoing investigations. Something was off. It didn't take long for Marcus to discover why. Late one evening, as he reviewed emails on his laptop, he stumbled upon leaked documents sent anonymously to his inbox. The files revealed that Gregory had been feeding confidential information to conservative media outlets, painting Marcus as unstable and unfit for leadership. Worse still, Gregory had allegedly met with Senator Alan Harper to discuss ways to undermine Marcus's authority. Marcus felt a surge of anger but forced himself to remain calm. Confronting Gregory directly would only escalate tensions without resolving anything. Instead, he decided to focus on rallying support outside the agency. Grassroots movements inspired by his speech were gaining momentum, organizing protests, and demanding accountability from law enforcement agencies nationwide. Activists like Maya Rodriguez, a passionate advocate for racial equality, reached out to offer their assistance. "We're with you, Director Johnson," Maya told him during a phone call. Their conversation lifted his spirits, reminding him that he wasn't alone in this fight. Together, they strategized ways to amplify marginalized voices and push for meaningful reforms. Despite the growing pressure, Marcus couldn't ignore the toll this was taking on his personal life. Nicole noticed the changes in him, the sleepless nights, the constant pacing, the way he snapped at little things. One evening, after another grueling day, she confronted him gently. "You can't keep carrying all this weight by yourself," Nicole said, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You're human, Marcus. You're allowed to feel tired." Her words broke through his defenses, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to cry. Not tears of weakness, but of exhaustion, a release of the emotions he'd bottled up for so long. Nicole held him close, whispering reassurances until the storm passed. The next morning, Marcus woke up with renewed clarity. He realized that fighting for justice wasn't just about winning battles. It was about enduring setbacks and finding strength in vulnerability. With Nicole's support, he prepared for the road ahead, knowing full well that challenges awaited. The precinct. Richard Blake wrestled with his conscience. After days of soul-searching, he finally mustered the courage to write a letter to Marcus, apologizing for his role in the incident and expressing his desire to help drive change. Though unsure if it would make a difference, Richard mailed the letter anyway, hoping it might ease some of the guilt weighing on his heart. Meanwhile, Kevin Doyle doubled down on his defiance. Suspended from duty and stripped of his badge, he became a martyr for far-right groups who glorified his actions. At rallies, he delivered fiery speeches, blaming cancel culture for destroying careers and vowing to fight back against perceived injustices. As the nation watched these events unfold, opinions remained divided. Some saw Marcus as a hero, standing up against oppression, while others viewed him as a threat to tradition and order. Amidst the chaos, Marcus stood firm, guided by the belief that true progress required sacrifice. One evening, as he gazed out the window of his office at the city lights below, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come and how much farther he still had to go. The journey wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face whatever came next. For now, that was enough. The weeks following the investigation into Kevin Doyle and Richard Blake had been grueling for Marcus Johnson. Every day brought new challenges, attacks from political opponents, smear campaigns in the media, and whispers of betrayal within the FBI itself. Yet through it all, Marcus remained steadfast, refusing to back down despite the mounting pressure. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. One crisp morning, as Marcus arrived at FBI headquarters, he was summoned to an unexpected meeting with President Eleanor Grayson. He entered the Oval Office, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The president sat behind her desk, flanked by advisors whose expressions ranged from sympathetic to stern. Evelyn Monroe stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "Marcus," the president began, her tone calm but firm, "you've done remarkable work during your tenure as FBI director. However, recent events have created complications." Marcus nodded slowly, bracing himself for what was coming. "The calls haven't stopped," the president continued. "From key allies, donors, even members of Congress, they're concerned that your actions are destabilizing important relationships. After much deliberation, I regret to inform you that we've lost confidence in your ability to lead effectively under these circumstances." For a moment, Marcus felt as though the floor beneath him had vanished. He opened his mouth to respond, but found no words. Instead, he simply stared at the president, searching for any sign of hesitation or doubt in her decision. There was none. "You're firing me?" Marcus finally managed to ask, his voice steady despite the turmoil brewing. Inside him, "It's not personal, Marcus," the president replied softly, though her words offered little comfort. "It's politics." As Marcus left the White House later that day, he felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, but also relief. For months, he had been fighting battles on multiple fronts, trying to hold on to his principles while navigating a minefield of opposition. Now freed from the constraints of his position, he realized he could channel his energy into something greater. News of Marcus's dismissal spread like wildfire, sparking outrage across the nation. Social media erupted with hashtags like "Stand with Marcus" and "Iraq Justice for All." Protesters gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read "Reform Now" and "Accountability Matters." Even some of his fiercest critics softened their stance, acknowledging the unfairness of his treatment. That evening, Marcus returned home to find Nicole waiting for him. She greeted him with open arms, holding him close as they processed the events of the day together. "They can take away your title," Nicole said firmly, "but they can't take away who you are. You've always fought for what's right. Keep going, for everyone who believes in you." Her words reignited a spark within Marcus. Together, they spent hours brainstorming ideas for moving forward. By the end of the night, they had a plan: to establish a non-profit organization dedicated to combating racial injustice and promoting transparency in law enforcement. They called it Justice Forward. In the days that followed, Marcus threw himself into building the organization. With support from grassroots activists, community leaders, and allies within the government, Justice Forward quickly gained traction. Fundraisers were organized, partnerships formed, and initiatives launched to address systemic issues plaguing law enforcement agencies nationwide. Meanwhile, Kevin Doyle became a polarizing figure. Stripped of his badge and ostracized by many former colleagues, he embraced his newfound status as a symbol of resistance against perceived political correctness. At rallies, he delivered fiery speeches, blaming Marcus and others like him for dividing the country. His rhetoric resonated with far-right groups, further entrenching divisions within society. Richard Blake, on the other hand, struggled with guilt and regret. Haunted by memories of the incident, he reached out to Marcus privately, hoping to make amends. To his surprise, Marcus agreed to meet with him. They met at a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon. Richard entered nervously, unsure how Marcus would react. But when Marcus extended his hand in greeting, Richard felt a glimmer of hope. "I owe you an apology," Richard began, his voice trembling. "What happened that night? It shouldn't have. I should have done more to stop it." Marcus listened, quietly, studying Richard's face. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. If you truly want to help, there's plenty of work to be done. Reforms won't happen overnight. But every step counts." Richard nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of purpose. Inspired by Marcus's forgiveness, he decided to volunteer with Justice Forward, determined to contribute to meaningful change. Back at the precinct, tensions simmered as officers debated the fallout from the incident. Some defended Kevin, dismissing criticism as unwarranted attacks on law enforcement. Others, however, acknowledged the need for reform, recognizing that trust between police and communities couldn't be rebuilt without accountability. As weeks turned into months, Marcus poured his heart and soul into Justice Forward. The organization grew rapidly, earning recognition for its innovative approaches to addressing systemic racism and fostering dialogue between communities and law enforcement. Activists praised Marcus's leadership, calling him a beacon of hope in turbulent times. Despite everything he had endured, Marcus refused to let bitterness consume him. He knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles, but he remained optimistic. Change was possible. It just required persistence, unity, and unwavering commitment. One evening, as he prepared for bed, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come since that fateful night on the Chicago street. Though he had lost his job, he had gained something far more valuable, a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. Outside, rain pattered gently against the windows, washing away the remnants of a stormy past. Inside, Marcus smiled faintly, knowing that brighter days lay ahead, not just for him, but for countless others counting on him to lead the way. Months had passed since Marcus Johnson was fired as FBI director, but his journey was far from over. In fact, it felt like a new beginning, one filled with purpose, determination, and the unwavering belief that change was possible. His nonprofit organization, Justice Forward, had become a beacon of hope for countless individuals across the country who shared his vision of a fairer, more equitable society. On this particular day, Marcus stood backstage at a national summit on criminal justice reform, preparing to deliver the keynote address. The event was being held in a sprawling convention center in Washington, D.C., and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Activists, lawmakers, community leaders, and even some law enforcement officials had gathered to discuss solutions to systemic issues plaguing the nation. For Marcus, it was an opportunity to reflect on everything he had been through and to inspire others to join the fight for justice. As he waited for his turn to speak, Marcus glanced around the bustling area behind the stage. Nicole stood nearby, offering quiet encouragement with her steady gaze. She had been his rock throughout this entire journey, supporting him every step of the way. Her presence reminded him why he kept pushing forward, not just for himself, but for their family, their community, and future generations. Finally, it was time. The MC introduced Marcus, and the crowd erupted into applause as he walked onto the stage. Standing beneath bright lights, he took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of faces before him. Some were familiar, others were strangers. But they all shared one thing in common: a desire to create meaningful change. "Thank you," Marcus began, his voice strong and clear. "Thank you for being here today, for showing up, for listening, and most importantly, for caring. We're living in a moment where our actions will define the future of this country." He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "When I first started down this path, I never imagined I'd face the challenges I did. Being held at gunpoint by someone sworn to protect me, losing my job because I dared to speak out. These experiences could have broken me, but instead they strengthened my resolve." The audience listened intently, hanging on every word. Marcus spoke about the pain of racism, the frustration of fighting against entrenched systems, and the importance of unity and overcoming division. He shared stories of resilience, from activists risking their lives to demand accountability, to police officers working tirelessly to rebuild trust within their communities. "We can't ignore the problems we face," Marcus said firmly. "But we also can't let fear or anger dictate our response. Real change requires understanding, dialogue, and action. It requires us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our institutions, and to do the hard work of fixing what's broken." His speech resonated deeply with those in attendance. Many nodded in agreement, while others wiped away tears. Among them sat Richard Blake, who had traveled from Chicago to hear Marcus speak. Watching him now, standing tall and speaking with such conviction, Richard felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he still had much to atone for, but volunteering with Justice Forward had given him a chance to contribute positively to the movement Marcus championed. After the speech, reporters swarmed Marcus, eager to learn more about his plans for the future. One question came up repeatedly: would he consider running for office someday? Marcus smiled faintly, deflecting the inquiries with grace. "My focus right now is on building bridges," he explained. "Whether that leads to politics or something else remains to be seen. What matters is staying true to the mission, to creating a world where everyone feels safe, valued, and heard." As the summit drew to a close, Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Some thanked him for his courage, others pledged their support for Justice Forward. Among them was Senator Harper, the same man who had once criticized Marcus so harshly. Now humbled by the growing momentum for reform, Harper extended an olive branch. "I may not agree with everything you stand for," Harper admitted gruffly, "but I respect your dedication. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know." Marcus accepted the gesture with gratitude, recognizing it as a small yet significant step toward healing divides. Later that evening, as Marcus and Nicole returned to their hotel room, they reflected on the day's events. Exhaustion tugged at Marcus's body, but his spirit remained buoyant. "You did good today," Nicole said softly, wrapping her arms around him. "People are listening. They're ready to follow your lead." Marcus nodded, leaning into her. Embrace. "It's not about me, though. It's about all of us working together. Change doesn't happen overnight, but if we stay committed, we'll get there." Outside, the city glowed under a starry sky. Protest signs and banners hung in shop windows, reminders of the ongoing struggle for justice. Yet amidst the challenges, there was hope, a sense that progress, however slow, was within reach. In the weeks and months that followed, Marcus continued to lead Justice Forward with passion and integrity. The organization launched groundbreaking initiatives aimed at training law enforcement officers in de-escalation techniques, fostering open dialogues between police departments and marginalized communities, and advocating for policy changes at both local and national levels. Richard Blake became an integral part of the effort, using his experience to educate fellow officers about implicit bias and the importance of accountability. Though he faced skepticism from some colleagues, he persevered, knowing his contributions made a difference. Kevin Doyle, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. His attempts to rally support for his cause ultimately failed, as public opinion shifted toward calls for reform. Stripped of influence and credibility, he retreated from the spotlight, a cautionary tale of resistance to progress. For Marcus, the journey was far from over. There would always be setbacks, moments of doubt, and battles yet to be fought. But, as long as people believed in the possibility of a better tomorrow, he knew the fight was worth it. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, gazing out at the reflecting pool. Around him, volunteers from Justice Forward distributed flyers and engaged with passers-by, spreading awareness about upcoming campaigns. Children played nearby, laughing and chasing each other without a care in the world. In that moment, Marcus allowed himself to dream, not just of reforms or policies, but of a future where no child grew up fearing those meant to protect them. A future where equality wasn't an aspiration, but a reality. Turning to Nicole, who stood beside him, he smiled. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," he said. She grinned back, squeezing his hand. "And we're ready." Together, they walked forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because for Marcus Johnson, the fight for justice wasn't just a career. It was a calling. And as long as there were hearts willing to listen and hands ready to act, the dream of a brighter future would live on.